VikesNow, I am Dustin Baker, here to talk to you dieharders. I know you're dieharders if the team is at 0-3, and you're still tuning in to shows like this. I think looking for a little hope, trying to figure out, is this team, can they turn it around, or are we on a steady march to the NFL draft in April? That's a fair thing to start thinking about at 0-3. I tend to think that this team is better than a traditional 0-3 team, that is just shitty all around. I think the Vikings are better than that. But as I've said on the show and in VikingsTerritory.com ratings, at 0-3, it really doesn't matter if you think you're good. You still have a giant hole to climb out of, and that's what these Vikings will attempt to do at Carolina. Adam Thielen's team, Amir Smith-Marsette's former team, Xavier Woods is their safety, but I think he's hurt and won't play this week. It's a giant game for two winless teams, especially the Vikings, who are in a competitive rebuild. I read an interesting piece on the 33rd team from your guy, Rick Spielman. And he's talking about, what general managers tend to start thinking about the now, trading for assets or trading away assets. And he tended to say that it's after week 4 is really when a general manager, I think that's kind of in unison with the 16-game season because you're at the 1/4 mark, and that would make sense because Spielman was a general manager for most of the 16-game era, or most of his tenure was 16 games. So that's an interesting factoid that after week 4, according to Spielman, who should know, that's when the general managers and front offices will start to say, all right, what do we have? Are we buying? Are we selling? So in theory, if the Vikings lose this damn thing at 0-4, they could indeed become sellers, whether that's Kirk Cousins or Janiel Hunter. We're going to get into all that for these stakes. Vikings-Panthers. And kind of an unexpected development, Bryce Young is trending towards playing, which I think is good news because we know Brian Flores will blitz the pants off whoever he plays, no matter how good that quarterback is. And Andy Dalton is probably a better character to pick up blitz packages than Bryce Young. I'll put it this way. If the Vikings iteration of a 2023 blitz can't get home against the Panthers offensive line and a quarterback in his 3rd career game, then the blitz won't work at all. So I think it's almost good news that Bryce Young is playing if you want the Vikings to win. We're hitting that territory where some folks don't want them to win because they want a better draft pick. But if you do indeed want the Vikings to win like this guy, Bryce Young on the menu, who will probably be very good in time, is a good opponent because hopefully they can get home with this pass rush that blitzes like a fiend but never seems to force pressure, especially against the Chargers. All right, here are the stakes. I'm going to go through what happens if they lose first and then what happens if they win to really set the table for you. Sunday noon, Charlotte, North Carolina, Vikings at Panthers. If these Vikings find a way to lose that game and drop to 0-4, not only are you in that dreaded hole that only one team has ever reached the postseason after finishing or starting 0-4, and that was the 92 San Diego Chargers, then you'd be starting a very rapid march to 0-5, because if they can't beat the Panthers, they're not going to beat the Chiefs. I don't care if that's at US Bank Stadium at its most ruckus. 0-4 start basically close to guarantees 0-5. And man, I don't know how you come back from that. You don't in NFL speak, and we really would transition into the draft. So I think right out, to get it to the forefront of your brain that the Vikings losing to the Panthers doesn't just mean 0-4. What it really means in code is 0-5, because if you don't have the nerve to beat the Panthers on the road, you're not going to beat the Chiefs at your place unless Patrick Mahomes gets hurt this weekend. So I think there's something more stomachable about 1-3 going into the Chiefs and then probably being 1-4 after that than 0-5. 0-5 has a whole new stigma and ball of wax where, even the most optimistic Vikings fans are probably close to mailing it in. Outside of playing the Chiefs, however, if the Vikings lose this weekend, whether it's a close game, they get their asses shellacked, you will continue to hear the deafening roar of Trade Kirk. Now, I don't quite understand why Cousins would go to the Jets. I think they're probably internally realizing that even if we do pull off a trade for a quarterback or we sign the good version of Carson Wentz, we're not going to get to the dance. the trade probably won't materialize this week, probably won't materialize next, and by that time the Jets are staring at the same record as the Vikings at 1-4 or 1-5, whatever it is when they pull the trigger on this hypothetical quarterback. They're already going to be out of it too. And it's not like the AFC is just waiting for a team to come, claim a contender. They've got oodles. They don't need any more help from contending football teams. So I don't see the Jets. The teams that do make sense to me are the Patriots. Mac Jones is kind of being his ordinary meh self, and I think they tried to trade him before the draft last April. So in theory, if there's any smoke at all to this Cousins stuff, I think it would either be the Patriots or to the 49ers if Brock Purdy got hurt. We already know that Kyle Shanahan absolutely loves Kirk Cousins. Let's say Brock Purdy is injured this weekend, and the Vikings are 0-4 thereafter. I could actually see Cousins to 49ers for the first time in my life. It's always been a trade theory for the last 3 years. I've always just been like, it's fun, but it's not going to happen. It could reasonably happen because this 49ers team is so damn good. They think they would realize that Sam Darnold is Sam Darnold a couple weeks into the experiment. But no matter what, me notwithstanding, if the Vikings go to 0-4 after the Panthers game, all of the trade Kirk stuff will be louder than it has been at all in his Vikings tenure. And then there's also going to be the trade Danielle Hunter talk. And it's actually more realistic, in my opinion, that they trade Danielle Hunter than it is they trade Kirk Cousins. Because even if they win and they get to 1-3 and then lose the Chiefs 1-4, hopefully beat the Bears 2-4, lose the 49ers 2-5, that's reasonable territory to say, we're not going anywhere. Let's get a second round or whatever it might be for Danielle Hunter. So I would actually, if there is such a sweepstakes for the Vikings selling some assets, I bet Danielle Hunter would be traded before Kirk Cousins. And again, if they lose to the Panthers, not only does the Kirk Cousins trade rumor mill really get loud, so does the Danielle Hunter stuff. The fun part, though, is that right now I think the Vikings in the draft order would be number 3 if the season just ended today. But if they get to 0-4, let's see, the Broncos and Bears are playing this weekend. One of those teams is going to win, we think. And the silver lining of losing to the Panthers, which I don't think will happen, is that you can get fully invested in the next guy, Caleb Williams, Drake May, if they make something out of the season, and then Shadur Sanders will be, available at 8th or 9th. I think it is a reasonable excuse for you to start peeking at quarterbacks in the future of these Vikings if they lose at Carolina. That's one of the giant stakes. If they win, you got to pump the brakes on it because there is a chance that they turn this thing around. They've got the offense to do it. Kirk Cousins is playing marvelously. They're getting the hard stuff is taken care of. The quarterback is playing well. You have 2 foundational offensive tackles in Christian Darrisaw and Brian O'Neill. And then you just got to hope that the defense matures on the fly and gets better. Most of us knew the defense wasn't going to be great. I thought it was going to be better than this. I thought some of these blitzes would actually work. They didn't last week. So that's all of the stuff, the stakes if they lose. 0-4 is really just 0-5. You'll hear an absolute just wave of Kirk Cousins trade theories if they hit 0-4. Trade Danielle Hunter will become realistic, which I think would actually happen if they're out of it by Halloween, which is the trade deadline. And then the fun part is you get to start speculating. You haven't been in this spot as a Vikings fan for years. We're going to have a top 10 draft pick. Which quarterback are we going to get? That would be kind of fun and certainly signal the end of the Cousins era. Now, if they win, well, wipe that smile off your face. He's not kidding. You're going to have a little hope. I don't care if they beat the Panthers by 1 or by 50. You're going to have a little hope that I knew there was a good team in there somewhere. Right now, the Vikings lead the NFL in turnovers with 9, and that's not in a good way. That means giving the ball away. And it doesn't matter if the 49ers or the Dolphins, who scored 70 points, if they had that naughty stat attached to them, they too would have a losing record. So I know that the Vikings, their reputation for at least being a playoff contender, let alone a Super Bowl contender, that has been firmly smashed by this turnover stuff. They'd have to figure that out. But if they do start to get to an average amount of turnovers, which basically means they just force more than they give away, You're going to have a little hope. If they beat the Panthers, it's like, all right, let's see where the chips fall against the Chiefs. Maybe have a shocker. They won a bunch of close games last year. They can do it again, damn it. I think the biggest part of finding a way to beat the Panthers, no matter how it looks, if it's sloppy, if it's pristine, they will give you a little hope that, all right, well, 1-3 isn't insurmountable. We could actually do this. That's what I think, as a fan, if you aren't wrapping your hands around a tank, embrace the tank, or what is it, implosion for the Trojan and Caleb Williams. You got to hope that they win if you're not in the just tank it. Because why else do you follow this sport? And also remember yesterday, Justin Jefferson's comments off the cuff. He said that it basically gets on his nerves that people are talking about trading Kirk or trading whoever, because in that locker room, they're not mailing it in. They don't think, well, hopefully we'll get Drake May next year. Nobody's thinking that. Maybe Kwesi Adofo-Mensah is peering ahead that far in advance. But the players don't think that 0-3 is a death sentence. I talked to last week. You saw it on the show. Sean Merriman and Bryant McKinney, they both said that, if they lose, if the Chargers lost, the Vikings lose, you don't go back into the locker room saying, well, that's it. Season's over. We're 0-3. Only 6 teams have ever come back from that. That's not how athletes or competitors think. So when Justin Jefferson came out and almost unsolicited said, I'm tired of hearing about trade talks when we're only 0-3. We still think we got a good football team. He said they got to stop shooting themselves in the foot. Yeah, the team still thinks that they can make something of us. Hell, they won 13 of these close games last year. So keep in mind that the face of the franchise isn't really enthused by you talking about trading his quarterback for what it's worth. There's also the possibility that this is a get-right game for the Vikings. I only think that they'll win it by a touchdown. I actually was tempted to pick the Panthers. I think that was out of spite. I was so pissed that they keep finding ways to lose. The Vikings have lost the playoff game, 3 preseason games, and 3 regular seasons. They haven't won any sort of competition at all, whether it's preseason or not, since against the Bears in Soldier Field in January, and that was a quasi-meaningless game. So I think there's always the chance that this is a get-right game. The Panthers are not formidable. Their defense is usually pretty good, but it's not been great this year, and the injuries are rough for them right now. So I'm not predicting it. I'm sick of predicting the Vikings are finally going to beat a team by 17 or more points. Every time I say it out loud, it never happens, so I'm not doing it anymore. But it would not be odd to me at all if the Vikings come out and finally hit on all cylinders. One thing that's weird, as I was digging through the numbers this week, is the Vikings haven't scored a first-quarter touchdown this year. 0. Only a couple other teams, I think it is the Steelers and Raiders. Only 3 teams have not scored in the first quarter, and the Vikings are one of them. So I think eventually, whether that's this year or next, when they start scoring a little bit in the first quarter and they get a hold on this fumble problem, there is a blueprint to be pretty good. It's just whether or not it'll make a difference if they start, week 10, hey, we got our first quarter touchdown, or if they do it on Sunday. And the final thing that I will leave you guys and gals with heading into week 4 is remember the 2020 season. There's a lot of parallels between that. That didn't, end gloriously. The Vikings wound up not making the postseason. That was the year that Dalvin Cook had his career year. They went into Lambeau on that windy day after a bye and smashed the Packers. Went on a win streak, got the son of a bitch to 6-6 by early December, and then they kind of had that fateful game against the Buccaneers in Tampa where if they win, they were in a driver's seat to get the wild card. Well, they lost. They had the defensive pass interference at the end of the half and bullshit like that. But there are parallels to that season and this season, which means I wouldn't be surprised at all if they make this year competitive, one of those lovely seasons where you're chasing 500. If you remember in the 2020 season, they got beat by the Packers at home. No fans were there. That was coming off the 2019 season, and I think there was a reasonable thought the Vikings could beat the Packers in week 1. Nope. Same thing with the Buccaneers this year, lost at home. And then they went on the road in 2020 to the Colts, looked absolutely horrible. And kind of the same. They didn't look horrible against the Eagles. They certainly didn't look good. And then they came home, the 2020 Vikings, to play the Titans, and they lost in a squeaker. That AFC team beat them out. That was Justin Jefferson's breakout game. Well, they came home this year. They lost to the Chargers by a touchdown. Should have won the thing if Hawkinson can grab the ball in his fingertips and fingernails and no cigar. Then, after that 0-3 start in 2020, they went on the road to Deshaun Watson's Houston Texans. We didn't know at the time that they were going to be piss poor. It felt like you were still playing Deshaun Watson, the good version, the untainted, reputational version on the road. And the Vikings found a way to win that game. So there's parallels here that you're going on the road against the Panthers. Decent team, but you should beat them. And then they came back and lost to the Falcons in another horrible game. But after that, they had their bye week, and then they went on a run. And they ended up getting it to 6-6. I think it was on December 6th or something like that. And became this close to making the season relevant. So I do feel there's a lot of strong parallels between these two teams in that they've started the same way. And if they win against the Panthers, it'll feel identical to the Vikings beating the who was it in 2020? The Texans, and making this thing fun, because I think ultimately, there's a faction that wants to just see him go 2-15 and get Caleb Williams, and then there's some that say like, all right, no, I'd rather sit down and be entertained on Sundays and not watch a bunch of tanking buffoons. We shall see what version we'll get, because the Panthers game is a big tell. If they take care of business and they win, like the talent on the roster probably suggests, then you're perfectly within your right to talk yourself into a way they could beat the Chiefs. And then after that, they have the Bears, who look horrible. And they're at home against the 49ers. And then pretty soon after that, the schedule starts to open up. We've talked about that ad nauseum at the Packers, who didn't look too daunting last night. And then what is it? The Falcons, Saints, Broncos, and Bears again. A lot of winnable games in November. Keep that in mind. If the Vikings can beat the Panthers on Sunday and get something going, the schedule really softens up in about a month. All right, that's all I got. I got the Vikings winning 28-21. They better not make me look like a moron again. Skol, baby.